Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. We'll give everyone just a few minutes to filter on through, but I hope you're all having a wonderful day. It's great to see so many of you here. Got 100 participants so far, with I think almost 350 of you registered, so it's wonderful to see so many Marie Curie funded researchers here to learn more about Open Research Europe. Let me know if you're having any issues with hearing me or anything like that in the chat function. And I'll go through introductions and everything shortly. Just so everyone's aware, up on the sort of top bar of Teams, there's a chat function for you to discuss what we're talking about at the moment. But if you have any questions at all, specifically questions, it would be helpful if you use the Q&A function instead of the chat function. That just stops your questions getting lost. And it means that you can upvote other people's questions. So the chances are, if you have a question, somebody else has that question as well, and they might have been slightly quicker on the draw in typing it. So do feel free to upvote any questions that you see that you would like the answers to. We will be posting that presentation up on Zenodo after the event, so you can refer back to a sort of PDF of the presentation. And I believe that you should receive a link to a recording after the session's over as well. So you can refer back to it, and I'll give you can see my contact details here, but I'll also have a bunch of other contact details at the end so that you can reach out to me if you've got any questions and don't happen to sort of see or it wasn't addressed in the webinar for whatever reason. You may also hear beeping over the next few minutes. My colleague will be joining us later, but I will be managing things on both ends, tech-wise and presenting-wise for a little bit. So if you see me get distracted by a notification, I apologise. I am letting someone in. So it's been a few minutes. So without further ado, I think we'll move into introductions and saying hello to everyone. So I am Emma Smith. I'm the one that's been monologuing at you for a little bit and will continue to monologue at you for the first part of this webinar. I've worked in publishing since 2018 and have joined Open Research Europe, or F1000, towards the end of last year, and I've been working on publishing platforms like Open Research Europe since I started, sort of helping with the sort of day-to-day oversight and sort of sharing information to folks like yourselves. Once I have stopped talking about Open Research Europe, I will hand over to Dr. Jean-Baptiste Cole, who is a researcher in tectonics and structural geology and has published several times on Open Research Europe. And so they will share their experiences of publishing with Open Research Europe and give you a little bit more of an author's perspective so that you don't just have me telling you stuff about the platform, you also hear like an actual author's actual experience of what it's like using Open Research Europe. And so you sort of have that additional perspective. So without further ado, I'll move into my slides. Oh, wrong one. There we are. That's the one that I wanted. Right now, I'll talk to you about the platform, Open Research Europe, and how it works. So before I go on to that, I'll talk a little bit about open research specifically. What is it and why does open research practice benefit you? So open science, or open research more broadly, refers to making your academic research freely accessible to everyone, including the public. I'm sure most of you are aware of the move towards open access publishing in recent years. That's moving away from subscription access to journals and putting articles behind a paywall. And so open access is one key part of open research. But open research does go beyond just making the final research article available. It also includes sharing your methodology, sharing the underlying data, and also sharing accompanying communication around the research. So the back and forth that you have with researchers who are reviewing your work, posting preprints, as well as having different versions of the article, showing how the article progresses over time and across revisions. And we're seeing that there is a real growth in support for this practice of open research, both from the public and from more institutional support, like funders requesting things like open data policies and pre-printing articles before formal peer review. Some of the reasons that this benefits you as an author is that it helps provide greater transparency around the research and review process. This helps make peer reviews more constructive, especially if they're published openly, and it increases the visibility and potential impact of your work. Everyone is reading it, so potential policymakers are more likely to have access to it. Your fellow colleagues who maybe don't have a subscription to that journal that you were publishing in, now that your work's open, everyone can read it, and therefore that can lead to important things for you guys as researchers, like higher citation rates. It also helps within the academic community by making more kinds of research open to the public. So other academics sort of know what research you're undertaking and are less likely to repeat experiments or conduct work that is redundant. You are better able to build upon one another's research and make scientific research and humanities research a lot more collaborative and communicative across different fields and disciplines. Altogether, this reduces research waste and sort of helps with research endeavours in general. So, moving on to open research specifically. The European Commission wanted to establish an open research platform that sort of leads by example, allowing researchers to share their work, collaborate with others, and gain recognition for their contributions, both as authors and as reviewers, openly and quickly. Some of the aims that they had when developing that platform were to share research quickly, rather than waiting rounds and rounds of revision where your paper can't be read by anyone other than the editor and the reviewer, because it's stuck in that journal system. They wanted to ensure that papers are published as soon as it's possible. They also wanted to ensure that data is made openly available. And they wanted to accommodate a really diverse range of research outputs, not just like a standard research article and review, but a much wider array of article types to provide that more tailored approach for you as authors, to credit you for the vast array of work that goes into research articles that's not just that final product. So, for example, sharing things like new methodologies that you're creating and things like that. They also wanted a transparent and open peer review system, and they wanted to move away from journal impact factor as an indicator of quality so that the research can be judged on its own merits, and we provide article level metrics to support that. They also wanted a transparent and cost-effective way of publishing, so that there was no cost to you as authors or to your project budget or grant. So if you are eligible to publish on the platform, which as Marie Curie funded authors you would be, then you can publish an unlimited number of papers related to your eligible project without any cost to you. So F1000, the publishing organisation that I work for, won that tender back in the late 2010s, and Open Research Europe was launched with these principles in 2021. Open Research Europe has been lauded across the wider scholarly publishing landscape through initiatives such as Plan S, the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, and the EU are increasingly encouraging open research practices that Open Research Europe uses. And we've seen several major funders across Europe sign a statement of intent to support Open Research Europe in the coming years. So I've gone into a lot of what open research principles are and what Open Research Europe has as its sort of background, but what is the actual process of submitting to Open Research Europe? What is it that we actually do? So this is our open research publishing model, and we'll go sort of one step at a time. So first, you would submit the paper that you're wanting considered by Open Research Europe. And from there, it would undergo pre-publication checks. So our in-house team of professional editors will carry out those pre-publication checks on things like, have you made your data available? And if not, we'll sort of help you find or share information that will help you find appropriate repositories to share your data. Are you, as authors, actually eligible to publish on the platform? Is your article a scholarly article? Those kinds of checks. And once you have passed all of those checks, your article will be sent to our production team. Our production team will then fully typeset the article, and you will receive those proofs. And this helps to fully embed all of the XML and sort of backend information that helps make your article discoverable. From there, the article is published on Open Research Europe as a fully citable publication. It has a DOI and it's indexed in Google Scholar at this point in time. Once it's published, that's when we begin the peer review process. Our in-house team of editors will select expert reviewers to review your manuscript. This you can supplement with suggestions as of potentially appropriate reviewers, but our editors do sort of lead the charge on that to sort of help reduce the amount of work that you already have to do as an author. Once we have received 2 reviews, then you as authors are encouraged to revise the article and resubmit, much as you would revise your article in a sort of traditional journal format. Once the article passes peer review, and I'll get into the specifics of that in just a moment, that's when the article is sent to indexers like Zenodo, PubMed, Scopus, and others. An article is considered to be completely reviewed when it has received at least 2 peer review reports. If the reviewers have, as a part of their peer reviews that are made publicly available, the reviewers are asked to provide a status with their peer review. And that provides a sort of quick summary of what in their view, the article is like. So they can select an approved status for when manuscripts are pretty sound in terms of their methodology, and really the only changes that are suggested are really very minor, don't have any impact on the conclusions that the authors are drawing in the paper. Then we have the approved with reservation status. So this is when there are suggested revisions that could help improve the paper, but the fundamental results are okay, you know, the additional revisions are helpful, but not incredibly like super essential. And then there is not approved for manuscripts where the paper needs significant major revisions in order to support the claims that the authors are making. An article is considered to have passed peer review, like in this example here, when we have 2 approved statuses, or alternatively, 1 approved status and 2 approved with reservations statuses. So this is when an article has passed peer review, and that's when it gets indexed in those major databases like PubMed and Scopus. As I mentioned, there are we have article versioning capability, and the versions are literally limitless. So if you want to, you can continue to update your article. You can revise it both when the reviewers are suggesting revisions and for example, even if you've passed peer review, but you may be passed with 1 approved, 2 approved with reservations, and you want to address the concerns that the reviewers raised in the approved with reservations reviews, you can still continue to revise your paper. In this paper, for example, you can see 3 versions of the article are here on the right-hand side of the paper. In that first version, they had 2 approved with reservations peer reviews. On revision, they then received 2 approved with reservations and an approved, which means that version 2 passed peer review and was sent to indexers, but they wanted to address the remaining concerns raised and issued another version of their article. This is an example of open peer review in action with the full reviews, reviewers' names published alongside the article, and you can read the author's response as well, which you can read clicking view underneath the sort of status symbols. And you can also see here that there are article views and downloads metrics that help showcase the level of impact that your research is having rather than using the impact factor. Moving on to those article metrics, as I mentioned, this is a sort of wider array of what we can show, and these are immediately viewable after publication. So you start receiving this information as soon as your article is published, which again is before and during the review process, not all the way at the end. So, what articles can be published on Open Research Europe? As I mentioned, one of the briefs that the European Commission had was to support a really diverse array of research outputs and article types to help support research across disciplines, which have different formats that they typically share research, as well as to provide you as authors with more credit for the research that you're doing. So, for example, we have your traditional research article, as well as brief reports for those sort of shorter preliminary outputs and a variety of other things. Method articles where you're developing a new methodology, software tools for if you're developing new software, and study protocols if you're wanting to share your sort of protocol for your research ahead of time. So as you can see, there's a really wide array of article types to support a huge variety of research outputs that you might have. Each of these article types has guidelines and policies specifically for research in science, technology, and medicine, for research in the social sciences, and for research in the humanities. So this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to a research article. We appreciate there are wide differences in what you would expect to see in a research article, for example, in an engineering paper, relative to a research article about medieval history. So again, the guidance sort of varies by your discipline, and you can sort of see that on the Open Research Europe website. You have unlimited amount of submissions. There's no sort of cap on the amount of submissions that you can make to Open Research Europe. So you could share research outputs from across the life cycle of your project. So if you wanted to, you could share an initial literature review that guided your research proposal, the study protocol for a particular experiment or line of research that you're doing, the methodology that you then used. You can share a brief report from some of those preliminary responses or results that you received, and before diving into the full research article. So this helps give you credit throughout the research process and begin accruing publications much earlier in the process than you would get in just a traditional research article format. So let me take a sip of tea. What are the sort of practical steps about actually sharing your research on Open Research Europe? So as a sort of general submission checklist, it is pretty standard with what you would expect to see at other journals. So things like the work is original and hasn't been submitted to another journal, isn't under consideration at another journal. That the study itself meets the relevant research and publication standards, that the methodological details, where you have them, are supplied, and that the data has been made available, that everyone understands Open Research Europe's journal policies and the publishing model, where we publish first and then do the peer review process openly and transparently afterwards, and ensuring that your author and affiliation information and conflict of interest statements are all fully provided. This, it says cost action there, I should say Marie Curie. So the Open Research Europe publishing with us ensures that you're meeting your Marie Curie grant requirements in terms of sharing your research in an open manner. In terms of your data availability, we ask that all data is made available unless there are some limited exceptions. So this can be raw data, for example, data you've actively generated as a part of your study, and you can share this in an approved data repository under an open access license so that other people can reuse that data. And there should be a permanent identifier for that data set, like a DOI. Or it could be source data, so data that you maybe didn't generate, but it was used for your research. So for example, if you've used archival resources, or if you've used another person's data set, you should just provide the relevant details so that other people, if they wanted to, could access that source data. So in general, this principle is making your data as open as possible and as closed as necessary. So if you need to protect participant anonymity, that's absolutely fine. But what can you make available, and how would people go about accessing that data through various data sharing agreements? If you have any questions, you're not really sure exactly where would be the best place to deposit your data, please do get in touch with us. We have resources on the website, and do feel free to get in touch. Our editorial team may be able to supply more resources, and I'm also happy to chat and sort of help provide guidance where I can. I also wanted to highlight that the Marie Curie actions have their full own gateway on Open Research Europe, and this allows you to submit your work directly to the MSCA gateway, and so your work can be included among the work of other MSCA beneficiaries. Currently, we have almost 240 articles published there across a really wide array of subject areas and disciplines. I've included a sample of them here, but you can always browse that and see what other research your MSCA beneficiary colleagues have been publishing. And then in terms of indexation, I just wanted to highlight that we are indexed in a variety of places. So as I mentioned, your initial publication, the one that comes out first before peer review, is sent to Google Scholar. So it begins being discoverable very, very early in the process. And then once the article passes peer review, so after the peer review process, and you have those 2 approved or 1 approved, 2 approved with reservations, peer review statuses attached to your article, that's when it's sent to indexes such as Scopus, PubMed, and the others sort of listed on this website. You can see a full list of what is where we're indexed on the Open Research Europe website as well, if you would like to get into that in a bit more detail. So in terms of what's next for Open Research Europe, there is a new open source platform that is currently being built by the Public Knowledge Project, adapting their systems to suit Open Research Europe's model. We're also looking to widen the eligibility criteria. So initially, Open Research Europe was only accessible to beneficiaries of the Horizon programs. And now, as you can see, as Marie Curie beneficiaries, you are also eligible to publish, and so we're seeking to sort of widen those criteria. We've also received support from national funders across Europe to support Open Research Europe as a platform. And this really helps drive Open Research Europe forward as a collectively owned and supported European research publishing programme for the benefit of European researchers. So I am going to keep quiet now and get rid of my slides before I hand over to Dr. Cole. So let me stop sharing. I'm sure you'll be glad of a change of voice. Yes, Dr. Cole.
Is it okay? Can you see my screen now? You see that peer-reviewed publishing dawn of a new age? Yeah.
All good. Yeah.
Okay, great, excellent. So thank you very much for this introduction, Emma. I mean, it's really great to be here, and just find out now, how many of you have felt like the guy on this picture when it comes down to publishing papers? Show of hands. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, felt like that so many times when it comes to publishing, and really, you know, have any one of you seen that movie, the Internship? I felt it was quite an interesting movie, especially when it came to that moment where Vince Vaughn comes and say to this pizzeria place owner that we all like we know what we know, but you know what's the scariest thing in life is? The thing in life that frightens us the most? Change. And yeah, change can be a bee. It really can be and drive us nuts. And change affects also not only us who are Marie Curie and therefore probably non-permanent employees, but also, unfortunately, our dear elderly, more experienced researchers whose instinct has not been accustomed in the latest years to be subjected to change. So their survival instinct suddenly perceives the change of paradigm or whatever your paper is going to suggest as a threat, because it's going to involve uncertainty for them and certainly effort to which they're no longer accustomed to adapt to a new model, to a new paradigm. Of course, yeah, I think that sums it up. So that comes from many places, and I think this is yeah, omnipresent among scientists. I changed that to people. Yeah, what Alfred Adler called complexes of inferiority. Basically, a feeling of inferiority, helplessness, which one needs to compensate. Inadequate upbringing, people feeling like never felt gratified or never felt encouraged, and that leads to complexes of inferiority, and also complexes of superiority, which are actually rooted in a complex of inferiority. That's very sad because it leads to aggressive behavior and withdrawal and victimization. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about these elderly people who are supposed to be wiser, more experienced, and that are judging, generally chosen to judge your research as reviewers or as editors. And you have to think of them like this. And just like us, when we get a paper rejected, they have to go through the grief cycle. Now, we are temporary employees, so we must move on. We don't have the choice. Life is kicking us in the ass, and we need to move on with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and we need to accept the fact that we can't control everything. While these gentlemen, which, let's face it, still male-dominated, unfortunately, but it's changing gradually, but these people are generally, these more experienced people are generally stuck in the denial, anger phase when they see something new that they don't like or that destroys their legacy. Now, enough about them. A bit about me. This is who I am. I am a crazy mad scientist. I love writing papers, and I do research differently, and I think differently. I think out of the box. a bit where I come from. Well, I started in France and did a bit of industry, or shall I say energy industry, in my lifetime, twice actually, once after my bachelor and once after my master's degree, because I couldn't get a PhD, unfortunately, which was what was my lifelong dream, be a researcher, which I eventually got. And I had short stints visiting PhDs, visiting researchers, and I wrote 1, 2, and 3 Marie Curie application before I got it, with short-term positions associated to that. So lecturers, researcher, commuting, and doing here and there. Now I have my, and then I got a postdoc just before leaving, and before getting my Marie Curie. I got a 2-year postdoc, which I combined with my 3-year Marie Curie between Montreal and Oslo. That was really a blessing at the time. And what I had not really understood then was, I actually unconsciously understood later, but on the moment, is that when I was submitting my second Marie Curie application, I chatted finally with the person that was supposed to be main supervisor, and I showed him some of my research finding. And what I did, without knowing it, I lit a bomb which blew up in his face and destroyed his entire research publishing strategy for the next 20 years. It had just swept the carpet from under his feet, and he was just, the only word that he could find on the moment was the F word and the B word to throw at me. And that was really, really tough, and really I did not understand what was happening. And then I went across the street on a research center as a postdoc, as I got just before getting my 3rd application funded. And then I, without knowing, lit an even bigger bomb with another discovery that I made, which blew up in the face of the lead researcher there. And these 2 gentlemen did not like that at all. And they have segregated my research, which is unfortunate, because it can help. I believe it can help. And they are not competent. But it's also one thing is that I did not see that they were not competent to understand my research. They had no background in the field or the skills I had gotten from industry. And this is my mistake. I had not managed to get these gentlemen on board all the way. So be careful and be sure of what people's intentions are. But anyway, now these gentlemen, they are very powerful, and they have made it awfully complicated for me to publish my research. Because, as you know, in the research landscape or the publishing landscape, the editors and the reviewers have all the power. And generally, when they read something new that does not agree with their own papers, they're very angry and they reject your papers, right? And on top of that, that's probably something that has some positive sides to it, but I don't have time. I don't have time for these gentlemen to go through their grief cycles successfully. I have many to go on for myself, and my life is not going to be as long as these 2 gentlemen. I am autistic, which I have just discovered, and I have a chronic or genetic heart problem, which I am sure not to live past 60, 70. So I don't have time. I don't have time for that. But luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel to share this exciting discovery that I made. And this light is Open Research Europe. When I discovered it about a year and a half ago, late 2023, I sent 1 paper and I couldn't stop myself. I think I've published 7 first author papers in Open Research Europe, and I have 2 more in review, and that's just 1 year and a half. I had a lot on my chest with this discovery, and I still have a lot. So it's very, very nice to have a journal that can really accept so much workload. I mean, it's F1000 powered, so it's a really huge team that has an incredible potential. And a bit about the journal, as I was saying, but from the author's perspective, the great thing about that is that it's published first with a DOI, findable immediately. Anyone can see it. Anyone can contact you and keep spitballing. You know, we get the ball rolling in many different directions and see where things go. And one more thing, it can never be rejected if it passes the first ethical and fair data checks and all eligibility checks. Your paper cannot be rejected, as it so often is when it proposes something dramatically new that people cannot comprehend because they don't have the experience, or because they fear reprisal from disagreeing with a powerful individual. So cannot be rejected. It will be published and it will be findable forever. That it passes peer review or not, it doesn't matter. It will be there. So now a bit about how to find the peer review process. It's not so much of a hassle, I must say, and it's really transparent. It really is something completely new. You are as the author are empowered. You finally have equal power as the reviewers. And this is something really important that you have to understand. The reviewer can no longer bully you in saying that you're just full of shit. That doesn't work. It no longer works. This is what is really great with Open Research Europe. So you can, of course, name 3 opposed reviewers, but that doesn't really matter. You can suggest reviewers, which I strongly encourage you to do, because it really speeds up the process and gives the team at F1000 a lot of names that they can check, and they do check thoroughly for conflicts of interests and potential collaboration on previous papers. But you can also use their reviewer finder tool, which is really helpful sometimes when you really have papers that you don't know. You are in a field where you're exploring the implication of a groundbreaking discovery you made, and you're not so sure. I'm a structural geologist, and I have my research has profound implications for paleontology, but I don't know so many paleontologists, unfortunately. So I don't know who would be best reviewer. So this tool can really be helpful. You can click on the 3 matching publication. It will display the names and the authors. You can and links to their PubMed page or something like that, and you can decide whether you think this suggested reviewer is a potential match, or you can so you add it to the list here, or you can just decide, no, I don't like this person, or I have a conflict of interest with this person, or this person is not competent to review my research, or is not simply not relevant. That really rarely happens. The tool is pretty good at finding matches, but it can happen. And now off with the peer review process. And I think one of the 2 greatest features of Open Research Europe, together with the fact that your papers can no longer be rejected, is that sometimes I would see you. So you see here the status of all the reviewers that I have added to the list, or that some the editorial team has added themselves because it was suggested by another referee or by someone that couldn't review. And some people agree. And then you say, okay, great, 3 people have agreed. Will speed up the process. And suddenly, you would realize that one of them has dropped out. So one thing that can happen is that they suddenly realize, oh, no, I don't have time to do that. But it's rare. I must say that it is very rare. When you accept to review a paper, you do it. What happens is that, and I know that because I know personally some of the individuals that have suddenly disappeared from that list of agreed, is that people at the moment of submitting their peer review report realize that, oh, shoot, I can't remain anonymous. I cannot insult that person and be defamatory in my comment. Shoot, I don't have all the power anymore. Oh, so I will just not submit my report. I will not be a reviewer anymore. So that can no longer happen. Referees, it's fully transparent. Referee cannot no longer remain anonymous, and they can no longer be injurious in their comments. They have to have their name attached to their comment. They have to stand up for their comment, for what they say. That means that Open Research Europe is also, on the other side, trying to create an environment for young scientists to also feel like they can express their opinion, may they disagree with powerful individuals. And that, I think, is a really amazing thing to do. And of course, if you may be afraid of sharing your opinion, then just decline. If you're really afraid to disagree with someone, just decline. But if you are a researcher and you want to propose something, you must be a tad courageous. You don't have the choice. You are going to change. You're here to change people's life. Europe believes in you. We believe in you, and we really want you to achieve great things. So please share it with everyone else. Open Research Europe is a great place to do that. You're not going to be just, oh, by the way, did I mention that it's a diamond open access journal, free to publish in and free to access? It's just checks all the boxes. And now, yeah, just on the editors, I mean, this is very new, but the Open Research Europe, the editor is no longer this person that tells you that, okay, the reviewers, one of the reviewers said no out of 3, so I'm inclined to say no as like him. So in most journals, the editors will also have an opinion on whether your paper should be published in their journal. No longer it is the case in Open Research Europe. An editor's mandate should not be to decide whether a paper should be published, because an editor is actually, well, technically biased, because it would generally tend to try to have as many papers published, or if it is an editor with questionable ideas and just wants to segregate ideas that are not agreeing with his, then he would decline publications which suggest an alternative to his models. An editor should be impartial. It should be a conflict solver between reviewers on one side and authors, and help them solve their differences. It is all about that. When some manuscript is submitted, the editor is a facilitator that sends the manuscript to the reviewers and tries to talk each of them to try to agree and make compromises. This is what it is about. And sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's not possible. Of course, that happens very well. And then the paper does not pass peer review, but it's still there and still can be improved. That's the beauty of Open Research Europe. It will always be there. And if 20 years later you want to give it another crack at this paper that still hasn't passed peer review, and let's say mentalities have evolved, paradigms changed in your field, then you go back to it and you can do it, and you don't start from scratch again. And Open Research Europe, as Emma said, it's moving away from irrelevant, and I insist on the word, irrelevant impact factors and citation indicators. These are not relevant to evaluate the quality and impact of your research. And I'm going to get, and this is a very stupid example, not stupid, it's a very basic example that shows the irony of using such irrelevant parameters. This is Alfred Wegener, the father of plate tectonics, basically the father of the foundation of the geosciences. For everything we do is connected to his finding that the continents have moved and are still moving. He published this book in 1915, or his first version, the first edition of the book, which has been cited a whopping 1,500 times. Google Scholar. Now, we know that this is mostly true. Not everything is true in his book, but a lot of things are still true and accepted, widely accepted. Now we go to this gentleman, against which I have nothing against. I mean, he's a very decent person, a very good researcher, and that also is very open to characterizing the uncertainty around his research. In 1971, he published an upgrade to the continental or plate tectonics theory of Wegener. And this has been cited more than twice more than Wegener's book, although it is actually extremely controversial and it works almost in no situation. So if you want to focus on being cited and having high impact factors, I suggest you start understanding that your research is going to be wrong or controversial. Let's put it this way. If you want to write a research proposal or write a paper, the introduction to a paper, let's say, and you want to introduce the field, you are not going to refer to something that is broadly accepted. We know it, we don't want to repeat it, but you want to go to the point. Okay, these mental plumes that this Mr. Jason Morgan has published about in 1971, this is still not completely accepted and it still has problems, and therefore it is cited because it is still controversial. All right. I'm going to stop now, but yeah, just to tell you, Open Research Europe is really one of the greatest things that has happened to me in the last year and a half. It's really a great experience and a great manuscript handling. Every time you look at Nature and Science reviews by authors, whether their paper was accepted or not, most of these reviews are negative because people feel like they're treated like shit. This never happens in Open Research Europe. I guarantee I've had 9 manuscripts submitted there, and it's really, every time it's different, but you feel like you're supported throughout the process, and you feel that you are always partly in control, that you have equal power with with the other forces that are at play. So thanks a lot. If you have questions, of course, again, I'll stay here, and don't hesitate. You also will have my presentation, and my email is in there. So happy to converse about this further. Cheers.
Thanks, Jean-Baptiste. That's super helpful. Kelly, I don't know if you are around to help with Q&As or not, because I haven't seen your face.
To share a little bit.
Would that be okay? Just because I am aware I monologued a lot for most of this webinar, so people might want another voice. So for those of you, I think I may have forgotten to introduce Kelly. That's entirely on me. But Kelly is is a lot of the driving force behind Open Research Europe, and is a wonderful person, and has worked in open access publishing for many a year. So they are wonderful. So questions, throw them at us.
All right.
And in the meantime, I will share the contact page for myself for people that have any questions that we don't get to.
Thank you very much. So I will be using the upvote feature in the Q&A to determine which questions we'll get to first. Any questions that we don't get to, we will post in a blog post at the end on Open Research Europe. So we will get to all the questions, even if we don't get to them in this session. So the first question we've got is, can we publish the same note or paper in arXiv and in Open Research Europe?
Yes, you can, because arXiv is a preprint server, and Open Research Journal acts, it's a peer-reviewed platform for like a journal. So it's they are sort of distinct kinds of publication. And so preprint servers are absolutely fine for you to share your work in and then submit to us.
Perfect, thank you. Second question, if you're working on a Marie Curie project that has finished or the grant has ended, are you still eligible to publish the results from that project on Open Research Europe?
Yes, you are. You can publish, as long as the research is coming from that project, you can publish that research with us for as long as you would like after the end of the actual project itself. So if you have a research output that you're thinking of sharing, but you're like, man, my grant ends in a month and there's no way I can pull this research article together in a month, absolutely fine. Just share it with us when it's ready. And that's absolutely a-okay. Just as long as it is funded in whole or in part by one of our eligible funding streams, of which the Marie Curie actions are one of them, then it's eligible for Open Research Europe.
Great, thank you. And then we've had a few questions just asking to confirm that publication is free, who is eligible to submit for free, how can it be free, how is it funded, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So we work centrally with the European Commission. So when you submit a manuscript to us, we then tell the European Commission, like, hey, we've had X amount of papers published on the platform, and then we chat with the European Commission centrally about funding arrangements. So for you guys as authors, it is free for you to publish as long as you're one of our eligible funding streams. If you're not an eligible funding stream, then you can't publish on the platform. There are a really wide array of eligible funding streams. So Horizon 2020, if there's anything outstanding from that, Horizon Europe, cost actions, the Marie Curie actions, if you're a member of staff with the European Commission, things like that. There is a web page that I won't be able to pull up right now, but it's called Eligibility under our How It Works section on the Open Research Europe website. And that lists all of the, thanks Kelly, that lists all of the eligible funding programs. So if even one author is publishing an output that they use that funding for on that paper, then it's eligible to publish. So if you have a sort of PhD that's funded by the Marie Curie actions, and you're the only person with eligible funding who is publishing on that paper, that article is still eligible for publication on Open Research Europe.
Just to further clarify that point as well, because we've had another question around that. The authorship position in the publication doesn't matter either. You do not have to be the first or the last author. You can be any author in the paper as long as the work itself was funded by the Commission and the eligible programs listed on that website. Then you can publish. Right, let me get back to the Q&A. How is the recognition for papers published in Open Research Europe when thinking about when your funding proposals are being reviewed or job applications? How do they assess papers published on Open Research Europe?
That is an excellent question that will probably vary by institution. But what I can say is that when your article is published, so again, like that initial stage, before peer review, when it's very first published on the platform, it receives a DOI and can immediately start being cited, start being viewed, and things like that. So you can point to your publication on Open Research Europe, even before peer review, as a demonstration of productivity, and that something is undergoing peer review as a part of your grant application and things like that. And because of the transparency of our process, it is easy for anyone who looks at that paper to see where it is in the process. So, for example, if you've just submitted a revised version that has started going through peer review and you have those sort of earlier, maybe you've got 2 approved with reservations peer reviews, then anyone sort of looking at that paper can see the stage that it's at, read those previous reviews and things like that. And finally, once it passes peer review, so you've got those 2 approved or 1 approved, 2 approved with reservations peer review statuses attached to your article, then the Open Research Europe paper is then sent to indexes like PubMed and Scopus, so that it is more akin to a sort of final version that you would find in a sort of traditional journal article, because it's being sent with 2 sort of indexes as a sort of like thumbs up, the reviewer said yes to this one. So that those are some various different ways that you can use a publication on Open Research Europe throughout its life cycle with us, and not just as you would have in a sort of traditional process of manuscript in prep, under review, and then an actual publication. You can instead point to exactly what reviewers have said, exactly where it is in the process. And I think Jean-Baptiste maybe has something to contribute as well from his experiences.
Yeah, actually, and this is from my experience as an ERC reviewer and evaluator. If I see a proposal that does not contain that the project will publish the data on Zenodo or on Open Research Europe or on any open access journal or but especially Open Research Europe or on any other open access data repository, I would not respond positively to that proposal. The reason is Europe is making that change, and Europe is the European Commission is one of the main source of funding for universities in Europe. There is a reason why we're going in this direction. We need progress to accelerate, not to be stopped constantly. And I think universities will have no choice but to adapt in the very near future. There is a need for them to value the fact that you have published in Open Research Europe, that you're acquainted with what it takes to make your research truly fair and findable, available, interpretable, and reusable. This is where we're going, and there's no going around it.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Great to get the author perspective there on that one. Let's have a look. We're getting quite a few questions around timelines. So can you give an overview of the timelines from submission to publication, and then from publication to peer review, etc.?
So obviously everything that I'm about to say is related to our sort of medians that we sort of take. In terms of submission to publication, those initial pre-publication checks, the ones where our editorial team are checking like, hey, is the paper eligible? Is the article in scope for us? And the various different pre-publication checks. They should get in touch with you within a few working days if they have any questions about that, those sort of initial checks. From there, it depends a lot on author responsiveness. If you are traveling, if you've submitted your paper right before conference season and can't get back to us, that will sort of obviously change how quickly the paper goes from the submission to publication stage. One of the things that we find is that there is sometimes confusion over what data can and should be made available, how best to make it available. So when you are preparing your submission, it's worthwhile checking out both our article guidelines and our open data software and code guidelines. I've got my email up on the screen that hopefully you can see. So if you have any questions ahead of submission, please don't hesitate to get in touch. There are also additional resources on the website just to check those things and then prevent delays just because you've sort of misunderstood what the data availability policy actually is and things like that. But yes, so you should get that initial email from us within a few working days. In terms of from when it's like accepted, so our editorial team's input is over, you've had that back and forth, to when it's published, that's normally, I think, a couple of weeks to get all the production stuff sorted, the proofing, the typesetting, any errors to correct in the proofs. And then it will go up online. So I think, again, because it depends so heavily on author responsiveness and what questions our editorial team ask and what needs to be provided, that can vary quite widely in terms of submission to publication times. Jean-Baptiste, you wanted to chip in here as well?
From experience, if the stars align and you have done your due diligence of preparing your data the way they should be prepared, and you know how they need to be prepared in advance, and you have done all the reference check in your paper, etc., it could go as quickly as 1 or 2 weeks to get it published and fully available. It can be awfully quick. But if you are if you are writing a paper like I did recently on a field that is not exactly mine, then the data are a bit more challenging to know how to share them and how to present them. And it took about 2 months of back and forth, but it was like 2 months. It was really intense discussion. It was not a lot of work, but it was back and forth. I think we had the 5 or 6 exchanges with the production team and Q&As on how to share the data or the references, etc. And it took about 2 months. It was really not overwhelming. It was really good. And when it comes to the peer review, if you want to have a firm number on it, I've had papers peer reviewed as quickly as and accepted and passing peer review as quickly as 3 weeks. And that, again, if all the stars align, then, and you have recommended a lot of referees and reviewers, and they are available, and they want to get rid of that paper off their plate because it's Christmas, then they will review it very quickly and done there. It can be that quick. So 2 weeks plus 3 weeks, it was the quickest paper I've ever seen accepted in passing peer review. 5 weeks total this one took. But I have another one that has been submitted more than a year ago, and it's still hasn't passed peer review, and it's a paper that shakes the foundation of my own science field. So it's completely normal, and I expected that, and it is perfectly fine. So you have, depending what you are publishing, of course.
Thank you so much. So just to add a few concrete numbers to that, I think the case study there from Jean-Baptiste is really helpful, and the overview from Emma. But the median times we're looking at the minute from submission to publication are around the 50-day mark. As we said, there's lots of variation there. There'll be some that come in within 2 weeks and some that take a bit longer, but median is around 51. Most of those papers receive their peer review reports by around the 70-day mark, and then they ultimately end up passing peer review somewhere around 90 days to 100 days. So those are the numbers that we're working with at the minute. But as Jean-Baptiste said, if you've done your due diligence, that can happen a lot quicker. Or if your paper is particularly complicated, then that can happen a lot slower. So swings and roundabouts, really. I don't know if that's an expression that translates across all of Europe, but it's a very British one. Okay, let's have a look. What have we got? Oh, we've had some questions about the thematic scope of Open Research Europe, and do we have sections or anything like that?
That is a great question. So thanks for asking. So Open Research Europe as a whole is designed for European researchers as a whole. In terms of subject scope as a platform, as long as you are eligible to publish on Open Research Europe, we will accept any topic for consideration for our editors to go through those pre-publication checks and to sort of begin that peer review process. In terms of looking like, hey, I work in chemistry, or I work on medieval history or Renaissance history in a particular country, we have on the website community gateways, which is our funky name for subject areas. So if you want to have a look for a specific broad topic, then the community gateways tab is where you would look. So maybe I should pull up Open Research Europe here. So you would go to gateways and collections and community gateways, and you can see the sort of broader subject areas here. We also have collections, which are akin to sort of much narrower in scope. There are sometimes like commissioned articles, or we've got gateway advisors that have reached out about a specific topic, or for example, cost actions are normally sort of larger interdisciplinary networks that want a home for their research. And so these are much smaller in scope than the community gateways, which are sort of broader subject areas. But yeah, those are the places that you would look. And if you click into each of them, let's say you're a health sciences researcher and you want your research tagged into that gateway, you can click directly submit to this gateway, and it will take you to a submission form and automatically tag your research into that gateway. That hopefully is helpful in terms of scope questions.
Brilliant, thank you. We've had someone comment saying that they agree with Jean-Baptiste about what you said about journal impact factors, but sadly many hiring committees still focus on this when reviewing applicants' CVs, and it still seems to have weight for things like the UK REF. Is there any insight or data on how Open Research Europe is viewed by the REF or other national bodies, such as the AQU Catalonia in Spain, or by social science departments, particularly with reference to hiring or promotion? So, as Emma and Jean-Baptiste said, there really is a big movement across Europe in particular to move away from using things like the impact factor in hiring decisions and also in funding decisions, but that is going to take a really long time. If we think about how long the world actually took to accept peer review, although we consider that to be a standard practice in publishing, it actually took decades before people were accepted having their papers to be peer reviewed rather than just having them published as soon as they were submitted. So change takes a really long time. However, things have really kind of picked up in the last few years, especially with the creation of COARA, the Coalition on Advancing Research Assessment, I think it stands for, and also with the European Commission pushing Open Research Europe. So I'm not sure if Emma mentioned this during their presentation, but the European Commission is really committed to expanding Open Research Europe and removing the eligibility criteria of it to allow researchers not funded by the European Commission to also make use of the platform. And in order to do that, they've been negotiating with many different funders, predominantly across Europe at the minute for obvious reasons, and asking them to contribute financially to the running of Open Research Europe, and therefore allow researchers based in that country or funded by those organisations to publish in Open Research Europe as well. So I mention this just to say that the more of these national funders and institutions that get on board with a model like Open Research Europe and engage with COARA, the more they will have to change their own hiring policies and funding policies to reflect this support for or the support for moving away from the impact factor and instead focusing on each individual piece of research and the worth of it on its own merit instead of looking at the venue of where it's published. Jean-Baptiste, do you want to come back in on that?
Yeah, I want to say that it can really have a change, can really seem miles away, but can really happen very suddenly, quickly. And when the first domino falls, then everything falls into place, and it's going to happen very quickly. So you want to be on the right side once this change happens. And just to my surprise, I was invited to give that talk. I just had not realized that I was that I had that much experience after a year and a half with Open Research Europe. You get a lot of opportunities. Be on the right side of it right now. Just it takes all of us to make the change, but it actually doesn't take so many of us. It takes only the first 10%, the first 10%, until we reach a tipping point where all the others, which are generally followers, and we can be followers for very different things in our lives, but we also can be drivers. And those 10% of people that are those all that we need to drive the other 80%, because there will always be these 10% of resistant people that will never accept it, which is fine. We need diversity, but these 10% people will drag the other 80% with them. So once this happens, it's going to be moving very fast. You really want to be publishing on Open Research Europe now, and that would make a big difference for you, for example, in terms of funding. As I say, as I review proposals for the ERC, and I got to make the decision, me, out of all the evaluators, since I know very much about open access, I was the one to make the decision on the last proposal funding. We funded 3 proposals, and 2 were very tied. One knew about open access, one did not even mention Open Research Europe, had no previous experience about open science and anything like that. That was clear. It was a clear cut. It was a clear decision factor.
Brilliant, thank you. Someone's asking if their paper is rejected, or I'm guessing in our quirky ORE language, if it receives not approved peer review statuses or doesn't reach the threshold to pass peer review, does the paper remain on the platform?
Yes, it does. One thing that I normally emphasize and didn't in this webinar for some reason is that not approved, despite the sort of scary red X, is not a rejection. It is an invitation for you to undertake major revisions. So much as like in a journal, you can get sort of accepted, minor revisions, major revisions. That's sort of broadly how you can think of approved with reservations, and not approved. So there is no outright rejection on Open Research Europe, because you can always revise your manuscript, submit a new version, and then those original reviewers are re-invited. We could potentially also secure new reviewers depending on if the first reviewers are unavailable for any reason. And then as those original reviewers now update their reviews to reflect your revisions, what was previously potentially like you had 1 not approved review and 1 approved with reservations, those could now become 2 approved reviews, and therefore your article would pass peer review and be indexed in Scopus and PubMed and what have you. So there is no rejection on the Open Research Europe platform. It is instead a go away, revise your paper, come back, and once you've got that new version issued, then the new reviewers, or the re-reviews, sorry, the new reviews can be updated to reflect those changes.
Go for it.
If I can say it,
yeah, go for it.
If you really just want to focus on the peer review, on passing peer review, it doesn't matter how many researchers disagree with your point of view and want to not approve your paper. As long as you can find a small community of people that agrees with you and understands what your paper is about and want and approve your paper, that's all that matters. If 1,000 people reject or want to not approve your paper, it's up to them, but it will pass peer review as soon as 2 people have approved it, or 1 approved and 2 plus with reservation.
Yeah, the other thing to mention on that point is we do check all of the reviews before they're published to make sure that they're actually founded in something and not just saying this paper is rubbish or I don't agree. They really have to explain in detail what it is that is the problem that they have with this paper, and they have to advise the authors constructively of what they can actually do to improve the paper. It's not enough to say you don't agree or you don't think this should be published. You need to explain why and explain what the authors can do to get it to the point where it should be accepted. So that's another kind of key difference in our model. I'm just going to nip to the chat because there's a few questions in here. So should the platform be considered an alternative to the journal, or can you submit to both Open Research Europe and any other named journal?
So it is an alternative to a journal instead. So you wouldn't be able to publish your research in the Journal of Neuroscience and Open Research Europe. It has to be one or the other, because we are a peer-reviewed platform, and if your article passes peer review, then it is indexed. So In much the same way as you wouldn't send your article to 2 journals at the same time, you wouldn't submit your article to Open Research Europe and another journal. So it is either or.
Then there's a question asking, is there any plan by the European Commission to suggest that universities consider Open Research Europe papers because they don't currently exist? Yes, and the Commission has followed up on that, and particularly where there are national policies or, for example, national approved lists of journals that you must publish within these named lists of journals in order for your paper to count for your next round of funding. If those sort of lists don't include Open Research Europe for whatever reason, then the European Commission has been lobbying, I guess would be the word, or at least having conversations with those various funding bodies and institutions to say, you know, you really should be including Open Research Europe, and this is why. And a lot of the times we've had those discussions, we realize it's just a lack of understanding or a lack of awareness as to what Open Research Europe is, how it's different, and how it should be seen as the same as a journal or an alternative to the conventional journal publishing model. So yes, they do that, and we should see that changing in the future. A question about someone looking to publish their review article and how long it might take to publish a review article in particular.
So we do consider review articles. I recommend checking out the article guidelines for your specific field of research. As I mentioned, we have those sort of categories of science, technology, medicine, social sciences, and humanities. So whichever most applies to you. But review articles are considered by Open Research Europe. In terms of timelines, it would be the same as the ones that we previously mentioned. So when you submit it to us, our editorial team should be in touch within a few working days. Then, depending on the sort of back and forth that you have with them, the sort of median time from submission to publication being around 50 days. And then those peer reviews, the median time to receiving at least 2 peer reviews being around 70 days, and to passing peer review, so the 2 approved or 1 approved, 2 approved with reservations, that hovering around the sort of 90, 100 day mark. So those are sort of broadly similar in terms of timelines. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Then there was a question about, do we have difficulty securing peer reviewers? Is it more difficult than on a conventional journal because they have to be non-anonymized and their reports will be published? Do you want to take that one, Emma, or do you want me to take it?
Would you be able to take that one? I
Yeah.
don't think we have radical differences, but I can't remember offhand.
No, so it normally takes us about 20 reviewers on average invited in order to get the 2 or 3 reviews secured for the platform. And the vast majority of people that decline to review for Open Research Europe is because of time. We don't really see a significant increase in people declining to review because of the open peer review element. It's really just part of the reviewer crisis that there's so many papers to review and lots of demands on researchers' time that this is often one that falls off, and that's completely understandable. So no, I mean, that's a fairly standard amount of invitations to be sending, especially in an open access journal or publication. Jean-Baptiste?
Yes, thanks. Use the reviewer finders tool. If for whatever reason that is, you don't have a list of ready email addresses of individual that you know will be able to act as reviewers in this field or this field, then I suggest to use this reviewer finding tool, so that you have at least about 10 reviewers at all time in the list ready to be checked by the editorial team in case some of them should drop out or should not have time or should not feel qualified to review your work. And then that would really speed up the process and selecting reviewers.
Perfect, thank you. So we've had a question about, when budgeting for a new Horizon Europe project, are publication costs still eligible under purchase costs, or is it mandatory to use Open Research Europe? It is not mandatory to use Open Research Europe. Under the agreement, under your Horizon Europe grant agreement, you are free to publish wherever you want, as long as the paper is made openly available and the data as well, if possible. There are exceptions to that rule as there are with any, but yeah, you don't have to use Open Research Europe, and I believe you still can claim for publication costs under purchase costs, but they would like it if you would use Open Research Europe, and I would like it too.
And it is
Since
free
there
with
is,
us, so
it is
I
free.
was
Yeah,
just
you
gonna-
don't have to
it is
claim
free
because
with
we
us.
charge the commission directly and they take care of all of that for you. Jean-Baptiste, was that what you were going to say? Because your hand went up.
No. I was going to say that as a reviewer, when I see costs attached to publication, to say that they would reports or projects are going to publish in Nature in Science, I start saying no, that is for me. If when it goes to cost, it is a cost that is very likely to be cut. So be careful with that. You don't need those costs. You can publish in many other journals. We don't need impact factor. We don't need citation anymore. These are, so why publish in Nature, which is a journal where generally the research published there is wrong. So it's, not always, but it's, yeah, we're trying to move away from that.
Yeah, that is one thing I would say. I mean, the cost that we charge to the European Commission is significantly less than what the average article processing charge would be to
Quite
publish
right.
in another open access journal. And we are much more open on the website about the service that you actually receive from us for that money that the Commission is paying. So as Emma may have mentioned, there's a pre-publication checks page on our website that fully explains everything that we do to check your manuscript. So it gives you a bit more of a quality check when it's initially published, and then we detail all of our peer review processes, the production phase. So we're much more transparent about every stage of the process. So you really know kind of what you're getting for what the commission is paying in comparison to other venues. Could you please elaborate on the difference between the pre-publication indexation and the approved version indexation? So after it's passed the pre-publication checks, where can we find it? And then once it's passed peer review, where can we find it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of when it's very initially published, it's just passed the publication checks and it's just gone up on Open Research Europe. You can find it on Open Research Europe and on Google Scholar. Once it's undergone the peer review process, that's when it is, and it's past peer review, that's when it's sent to other indexers as well. So Scopus, PubMed. A full list of this is detailed on our indexation page, going through who exactly it is the paper is sent to after it passes peer review. So there are some national bibliometric databases and then some of the sort of more well-known ones like PubMed and Scopus. So that's the sort of distinction there is Google Scholar will index quite broadly, whereas some of the other databases will only index once an article passes peer review, and that's the sort of distinction.
Great. Jean-Baptiste?
Yeah, just in case some of you should wonder, each version of your article, because it will have a different DOI. So when you publish you submit your article, it's published but not yet peer reviewed. That's one DOI. And then when the peer reviewers have come back to you and you have made revisions and you have submitted a revised version of your article, this will be attached a new DOI, all of which you will be able to find on the manuscripts page once they're published. They will always mention when you get to the papers page, if by mistake you are thrown to the first version of an article, we'll always tell you there is an updated version to that article. Do you want to see that one?
Yeah, so each version of the article gets its sort of child DOI, and so you can sort of trace back, for example, if there's a comment attached to like the first version of the article, and later versions potentially address that comment, then you can sort of decouple versions, but it's also they're linked together, so you can see an article that how it progresses over time as well. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, let's have a look. So we've had someone asking how they can become a reviewer for Open Research Europe, and I have dropped in the link to the reviewer page on the platform where if you scroll right down to the bottom, you can fill out a form to volunteer to become a reviewer for ORE. So if you're thinking about that, please look for that question. We've also had a question, how are the evaluators recruited, considering that researchers do not pay for the publication? I think you're talking about reviewers. in which case we've spoken about that quite a lot, that the reviewers are not paid. That was actually a discussion that we had at one of the Open Research Europe Scientific Advisory Board meetings. So it was kind of universally decided that that was a terrible idea and introduced this bias into the system. Yeah, so the reviewers are invited by the editorial team. We can source reviewers for you, but as Jean-Baptiste has mentioned, you can also put suggestions for reviewers in yourself, and you can use the reviewer finder tool as well to help you do that. Did you have something to add to this comment, Jean-Baptiste, or is your hand just still up from last
Oh, no,
time?
sorry. No, it's
Okay,
still
so
lower.
Emma?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So in terms of benefits you would get as a reviewer as well, it's worth highlighting that each review receives its own DOI as well. So you can, that means you can link it to your ORCID as a reviewer. All reviewers are named, so the work that you put in is credited to you, and potentially if you're mentoring a PhD student in peer review and things, they can be a named co-reviewer and also have their ORCID linked. So it allows you, rather than your peer review being buried in the back end of a journal system, never to see the light of day, instead your expertise is showcased, your thoughtfulness in your peer reviews is showcased as you provide comments publicly and openly to your fellow colleagues in the research community. And because it can be linked to your ORCID profile as well, then you can showcase that in a sort of separate place as well. And because it has a DOI, it can also be receive views and citation metrics on its own. So there are a lot of benefits to providing your open peer review beyond financial, which we don't provide. There is that sort of more for the general good and also receiving like actual credit for this, rather than just being like, hey, I reviewed in a CV.
So David is asking, in our Marie Curie action, we've decided to select associate doctoral candidates, which was not initially planned in the project. Can they also submit articles? As long as you're going to credit the Marie Curie grant that you were awarded in the funding section of the paper, so the work that was conducted in this paper was funded by the Marie Curie grant, that is fine, whether it was initially planned in the project or not, but doesn't really matter as long as we can clearly see that the subject matter is related. So obviously you can't have a grant on like plant biology and then come along and submit something about, I don't know, poetry or so. Like we will check to make sure that the work does appear to be connected to the grant that you're citing. But yeah, otherwise that's fine. Also a question about Marie Curie co-fund projects, and are all fellows still eligible for publishing their research? I believe that they are. I think that is listed on the eligibility page, but please double check. Since there is not an impact factor parameter, how is the quality of Open Research Europe as a journal evaluated?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one thing to note is that the European Commission really wanted to focus on the impact of your individual research, and the quality of a journal measured through impact factor is literally the amount of citations that journal got in the past couple of years divided by the amount of papers they published. So it doesn't measure the quality of your article. What we have instead is the full reviewer comments fully available. So when a reviewer states how amazing your research is and all of the strengths to your paper, and that it's a glowing gem in your research field, which obviously your research is, then you can point to that, you can cite that, and sort of showcase sort of what your peers are saying in the community. You also have those individual article level metrics to showcase your research, so views and downloads and who's reading your research where. And so you can showcase that over time, and you can begin accruing those views and citations much earlier in the process than you would in a traditional journal. Because of course, in a traditional journal, you've got all the rounds of review and then the the revisions that you have to do, and then the re-review, and then potentially the other revisions, and then the production process before it's finally made available to the public. In all of that time, your work would have been available on Open Research Europe, so you could begin sharing it amongst your networks for people to read and influence, their research and the way that they're thinking about your field. So that also helps to sort of showcase the impact of your individual work. So I hope that sort of helps address the question, which is more that the journal's quality is made up of the sort of quality of the peer review we provide and the articles that you guys are submitting, and not this sort of overall very sort of generic, very vague sort of measure that is impact factor.
Jean-Baptiste, did you want to come in?
Yeah, from experience. So first, because your papers on Open Research Europe are not mine, now that I know that, I recommend as many reviewers as possible, because then I get not only 2 reviewers reviewing my papers, but at least 4 or 5. Sometimes it really gets a lot of people. And when the evaluators will no longer be able to look at impact factor and citation, they will go into your research. The first thing they will find on Open Research Europe with the DOI is the peer review reports, how people have passed from rejecting your paper to progressively accepting it. They will see that you're a problem solver, that you set everyone, or that you make everyone agree with you, or you convince people. The second thing that came back from the feedback that came back from evaluation reports recently from evaluators that are reading my work and evaluating my suitability for research project is that they are forced to now look at the quality of the research. Are you creative? Are you thinking out of the box? Are you proposing groundbreaking research? And they truly look at that now. They don't have the choice. There is no way around it. They have to look and read a bit of your papers when they evaluate your proposals. So that's a great step forward, I should say.
Yeah, it's kind of concerning that we were making judgments without actually reading people's papers, but it's fine. So I have double checked, and the Marie Curie Code Fund projects are definitely eligible to publish their research on Open Research Europe. So please carry on. And then just in the last couple of minutes, we've been asked to elaborate on the relevance or advantage of non-anonymized peer review. Would it not be better to have double anonymized process in order to tackle the power narrative presented by Jean-Baptiste and also avoid the unconscious bias towards names? This is a really interesting question. So just thought we'd end on a high, bit of a debate.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, and one that comes up a lot in the publishing ecosystem of, how do you address these sort of the ways that, conscious or subconscious biases can affect the review process. I think from my perspective and from sort of the mandate that we were given by the European Commission in making Open Research Europe is very much around transparency. It's only by having things made available to the public and items that previously were sort of, publishing is a bit of a black box. It's very difficult to access piece of information in a sort of traditional journal process, peer reviews are not typically published still. So by having everything out in the public, by having the reviewers' comments public and attached to their names, it ensures that reviewers are providing their reviews in the most constructive way that they can, and still ensuring that those reviews are sort of honest critique, because, but done so respectfully, because you have to stand by your comments and do so in a sort of public way. And the same goes for authors, right? The author response is made public. The way that the authors address the comments that are provided by the reviewers, that's all made public as well. And so by having this discussion out in the open, it helps sort of or is it sunlight's the best disinfectant kind of thing? It ensures that everyone is held accountable for their actions and the way that they approach revisions, the way that they approach scholarly discussion and scholarly communication. And I think it also becomes a really powerful resource for the research community, because you can use these reviews as a teaching tool and the author responses as a teaching tool. Members of the public get a better understanding of how research works. And so rather than the narrative of, well, one scientist said this, and therefore this is truth, capital T, truth, they get a better understanding of, no, there is nuance. You have to make decisions based on budget or what tools you have access to or the latest developments in your field. And so it really helps showcase what research actually is, which is a lot of scholarly debate, reaching a consensus of greater and greater understanding of a topic. So I think that's sort of one of the benefits of transparency versus double anonymization, which can kind of allow a lot of these things to happen in the background that aren't based on names solely.
Okay,
so
we'll hand over to Jean-Baptiste to give
no,
us your perspective.
this is what it is. If you double anonymize, you're still hiding. You do not own your research. You do not own your comments. You have to own it. You have to have the courage of your words. Your words mean something. That you cannot just say something and not have it attached to your name. These are important things. We can't just play a game here. We are not in World War I where we were fighting in trenches and throwing missiles at people we couldn't even see. We are throwing words that mean something at another human being that may or may not think like we do, but we are going to try to find common ground with these people. We cannot segregate these people. They have the right to live. They have the right to have their ideas. They have the right to publish their research. We are going to find a way to make it through together, all together.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Emma, do you want to close us out?
Oh, sure. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you found the webinar useful. Huge thanks to Jean-Baptiste for joining us today, sharing his experiences. It's greatly appreciated. And I know that I saw several people in the chat thanking you for your presentation and your passion. So thank you for coming on today and sort of sharing from the author perspective.
Cheers. Thanks for the opportunity. It was really great.
I believe you'll receive a recording of the event after the session, should be via email. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help answer any questions that you might have. And as we mentioned, anything that's still on the questions that are still outstanding, we'll address in a blog post in the coming weeks. So thank you so much for everyone attending, and I hope that this was useful, and please do go ahead and hopefully submit. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.